Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a two-part session on technology. The first part, we're going to talk about just the overall landscape of where we are right now and how these systems are playing together and kind of the future of vacation rental tech as you guys see it. And then in the next session, we're really going to zero in on the property management software, the integrations, and how they're connecting with third-party systems and answer a lot of your tech questions. So, I mean, definitely bring those. So what I wanted to start with, I think, first is, actually, Rebecca, are you over there? Okay, never mind. I'll pull it up in a second. So in Ben, I'll address this first. Ben, in his last presentation, was talking about percentages of what you should spend on certain things, and the fact that, there's, out of $5, you have to make you're supposed to be making like 20%, the commission anyway, what you should be spending on marketing and what you should be spending on tech. And what he said after the presentation is that he really thought that number was around 1% of your total top line revenue. That's about what people are spending on technology. Steve, from your experience, do you think that's true or for you, or do you spend more or less? How are you looking at that?
I think the number is going to vary based on where you are in the life cycle. So if you're onboarding a new technology partner, you're going to have a higher cost for that year versus ongoing years. It's probably running 1% of our top line. That's probably true. But keep in mind, we're using hosted systems. We've been talking, earlier today, I talked about profitability, and some of these companies have gone out and built, massive systems, and I'm sure they're spending way more than 1% of their revenue on technology. But I would say 1% is kind of a back-of-the-envelope number.
So recently you've gone through the process of deciding to move to new software. Can you explain why you made that decision and how you made that decision?
Well, the reason why is that our provider sent us an email saying they were sunsetting. We were on V12, which when we were doing the sales cycle, they told us this is the system of the future. We were on Escapia, and they urged us to move to V12 because they were moving all their enterprise customers to V12, and this is where they were putting all their technology. And then a little over 3 years later, they came out and said, we're sunsetting V12. Now Escapia is going to be Escapia Plus. So, we certainly had concerns with V12 earlier, and really I think part of this, and one of the things I talked about lessons learned, is the culture of the company. And when we were dealing with HomeAway, it was a different company, and then they were purchased by Expedia, and they changed. So I think understanding who the leadership is, right, who sets the culture is part of that, and so that was why we ended up starting to do an RFP process and starting to build out specs for enterprise software systems back in spring of 2019. And we went through a full RFP with a number of companies. We ultimately ended up on our friends over here with Trax, and we're set to do a migration third quarter of 2020. But I mean, this is a pretty big deal for a company the size and scale of us. And I believe what you're going to hear, and you probably have heard, that there's a number of companies that are in the midst of this decision making or have made a decision already and are going to be migrating. So you're going to have a lot of companies migrating over the next year to 2 years.
I think that's what's interesting. And while I guess I left out doing this, introducing these guys, Steve Milo is the president and founder of VTrips, and Brett Parry is the head of product now. Started out as head of marketing and sales at Streamline, hence the t-shirt. And we have Ed Ulmer, who is the CEO and president of Barefoot. And then Matt Renner, who is now, you've moved up, right? You have a new role at TravelNet Solutions, which tracks one of your products, I guess now. You've rebranded.
We were always TravelNet. It just making it known that TravelNet was the parent company and Track is a product brand, yeah.
So I think what's cool about these three guys on the end is just that they're decision makers and they're people who are actually hitting policy at these companies, and it's a big deal. I mean, so I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope I'm not going to be too tough, but I'm sure you'll tell me. So this whole idea of having to change software right now, there's this feeling of like there's an urgency kind of in play with property managers. Steve was part of a group, a property management roundtable group that put together a spec. Rebecca, will you pull that slide up or that picture? I put this in the magazine, and if you scroll, these are tech functions and different headings of department type stuff. So we've got like accounting, reservation software, housekeeping, maintenance. Anyway, you just, keep going. So it's a lot of what was in your RFP process, but it's like these are all the tech functions that are included within your software systems or in a third-party system. Most of them, though, you've built some form of these within your system. So there's like the third-party solution, like a Breezeway, for instance, or a Price Labs, or another Navis, kind of a call CRM type function. But then you've also got things, in your system. Every time I look at this, and this was in a previous issue of the magazine, it makes me like a panic attack. Like, it's just like, wow, these companies, their employees are expected to know how to do these things.
Well, this is what you're showing is exactly what an RFP would entitle, and if you do this properly, you will screen out 95% of the PMS companies in the vendor hall, right? And there's, if you walk through the vendor hall, every one of these companies will tell you, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. The bottom line is 95% of these PMS cannot manage a property management company of a medium size and certainly an enterprise size. And I mean, it's a cautionary tale of companies who have made very quick decisions and then have paid for it by having to go backwards. And, in some of these cases with sunsetting of systems and, unknown leadership issues, who knows who was going to own VRBO, 2 years from now. I mean, and whether, who knows what the future of the software division is. I mean, clearly it's not part of the Expedia playbook. I mean, you have to really be on top of this. And, this stuff, what you're demonstrating is what everybody in this room should be doing when they're, figuring out where they're going. They should do a full RFP. This is not a small decision. You should not be careless with this. You need to be very, very careful and very precise and make sure you ask questions and make sure you see functionality.
Brett, actually, I'm just going with Ed. You've been around for a minute in this industry and software. Yeah. You've watched it evolve quite a bit. Sure. You've watched companies come and go. Mm-hmm. What does it take to be a serious software player in today's space?
I've probably seen about 25 systems come and go in the long run. My hair's a lot thinner than when I first started. FRS was the big player when I first got involved and so on. Ultimately, it is very similar to what all you do. You have to set an expectation. It's all about the managing your owners and setting a reasonable expectation for them. Our job is to do the same thing. Our longevity is, we learned really early on not to overpromise. I think that is probably the most important thing. And then to have an open conversation and try and be as transparent as you possibly can about these things. In some cases, you may be behind in something. But to, again, have that conversation and try and, thank you. Try to figure out how to resolve those things either by building or linking with something else that's out there, or ideally linking with multiple and building your own, so you give each of you choices. Is probably another important thing. As many choices, because you all are very smart. You all are small business people, and the bottom line is those dollars and so on. And the more choice you have, the more options and the more price comparison you can deal with. So transparency, honesty, and having a vision as well of where the future is going. It used to be so much easier, when we used to talk about what do you know, in 7 years, you don't want to buy software every 2 years. I think there was a couple years in there where people were shifting softwares every 2 or 3 years. It's crazy. This is a very expensive investment, not only in money and time, but understanding the vision of where the industry is going, I think, is incredibly important. And I know both of these guys have got some great visions, as do we. Probably a little different, but understanding that vision of where they're going to go, because you don't want to do this. You don't want to switch software every couple of years.
How do you decide what new features to build?
Me?
Yeah, still you.
We're more of a boutique software system. We tend to deal with bigger companies, and so they have a pulse in their market. They know what they are trying to accomplish. So we spend a lot of time feedbacking with them. We also spend a lot of time going to lots of events that are somewhat unrelated. We were just in New York City listening to a bunch of the national players. We go to real estate shows as well, because I don't know how many of you guys do real estate, but it is very much part of the vacation rental market. It's investment property. And so understanding where real estate is going, where Zillow is going, where long-terms are going are really, really important, because it's all merging together more and more every year.
Matt, you and I had a pretty decent discussion on the API. We had about this in the API article that's in the magazine right now. And the idea, which is an application programming interface, I'm learning, which allows your systems to connect. So if you have a breezeway and it communicates with Track and through an API, these APIs have to be written by the software companies, not by the third-party providers, which I find interesting. And then the third-party provider has to write to that and then work with you guys to do that. But they expect you to do this for no cost in some degree, in some places. Sometimes there are different ways of charging for this. But Matt, if I'm not mistaken, you don't charge for it. Is that correct? For integrations with third-party companies?
We don't charge for access to our API. Or I should say, we have a suite of APIs. We have like 300 or so different endpoints. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what third-party application is trying to get from your software, or what needs to go back to that third-party application. So we don't wallet. We don't put a wall up and say, you're going to charge, $1.50 a unit per month. If you want to use that software, we're going to monetize that. That doesn't mean we don't get third-party vendors that come to us and say, we want to pay you for access to your customers, or we want to incentivize you. And you listen to those things and you try to figure out, where do we want to be Switzerland and where do we want to maybe have some deeper relationships. But in general, like Track and Streamline Connect, we're willing to work with anyone that's willing to work with us if it's in the best interest of the customer and if we like their technology. And so, charging $1 a unit or something like that, just ultimately that's not where we're making our money,
So this thing about API, I know people are starting to get drowsy when we talk about API, but I mean, this was a requirement. When we put this RFP out, we said you must have an open API. And to me, what you need the systems to do, first and foremost, is accounting, owner statements, revenue processing, reservations, owner transactions, and those are your core requirements. Everything else, if you have an API, you can either use what the company provides you in their package system, or if it doesn't work, or you have a business that's more sophisticated or complicated or unique or boutique, you have the ability to go to a third-party vendor. And he's right. Some of these companies in this space have walled this out. And that is a big problem, because it limits and handcuffs you in terms of your ability to grow, scale, and build your business.
Brett, one of the things that we saw with Streamline, is you guys sold a lot of new software really quickly. I guess this was after Property Plus. How many of you used to be on Property Plus or V12 or First Resort? A couple. What are you guys using? What are you guys on? Software. Escapia?
This market may
Anybody?
be a little bit more sophisticated than other markets.
Yeah, but Property Plus was, and V12 were pretty popular here.
Well, Property
First
Plus
Resort
was
was
like
definitely
pervasive
popular
in
here.
large property managers, pervasive on especially, the East Coast, North
Right.
Carolina and all those areas.
So I was thinking through having to switch software. I'm saying most people have had to do that in the last 5-10 years. And so Streamline picked up a lot of them. Obviously, we've heard implementation challenges. Do you feel like you got in a little bit over your head, or do you think it was just like, it was just too much of a good thing, or am I over-exaggerating that?
Well, I think with Streamline, we have sort of a unique position in this space where we actually serve clients from 5 units all the way to several thousand units. So for us, I think catering to that many different types of property managers creates challenges because someone like Steve or another enterprise level type customer is typically going to be able to adopt our software easier than someone with 5 or 10 units that's sort of trying to get through sort of with limited staffing and trying to run the business at the same time. Because Streamline's such a universe of products, it's a little bit difficult for those people. The Property Plus companies, which we obviously took a ton of, 100% success rate. So not that we didn't have our bumps in the road and we didn't have our growing pains and learn from all that, but every one of them went live successfully, which in this industry I think is a pretty good record for us. But I think generally we learned a lot of lessons about being responsible with onboarding, how to grow, how to get better. We're still in the process of evolving our systems and our processes and our communication and setting expectations. I think that now that we have 700 companies or so, let's say 200 of those are probably more on the larger side. We really have a very well-rounded mix. So learning how to train someone with 5 units and someone with 2,000 units in the same flow can create challenges. But I would do it again if we had the opportunity. But we would obviously want to do it a little bit smarter, a little bit more calculated, and maybe manage that growth a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to manage too much growth when the opportunity is there. But it was something that we're very happy to have gone through it because I think experience in this industry from a property management software perspective is absolutely essential to knowing how to maintain clients and keeping them successful.
I think, it's been interesting to watch this whole space anyway for you guys for a while, but Track, all of a sudden you've got some traction in the industry. And so people are kind of having to ask, the emails I get are like, is it okay to move to Track? And for these same type of reasons, and it certainly wasn't just you, and moving over Property Plus to V12 was another implementation challenge. Ed, you've had your own. Like, when you just onboard a lot of people, it gets to be super difficult, and you do a lot of customization, Ed, so that even makes it harder.
We don't really do customization, but we build unique functionality, and we only run
Bad
one
word.
database. It's
Right.
okay. I hear it a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We build one, but again, we try to stay within our niche, and our niche tends to be 250 units or greater, more of a resort. But that doesn't mean you work within a resort. More like somebody that wants to
Leisure.
act like a resort, and so on. But yeah, and I would say in regards to Property Plus, it was a server-based system. So a lot of the training originally was people on the ground in face to face. I actually worked with Dave and Doug for a year, so I got to see at the end, kind of how they did things. Going online, our training process, and I can't imagine you guys are any different, our training process is mostly online. How many of you can get away for 8 hours for a week training on software? An hour a day, once a week is something that is more manageable and so on. But it's also really challenging because other things get in the way. If you've only got that 1 hour and it's scheduled in advance, and all of a sudden an emergency comes up, which is inevitable in this industry.
So, Matt, are you thinking about that? Is it something that keeps you up at night about, will we get in over our head onboarding too many people and not being able to deliver as promised?
My 1-year-old keeps me up at night. Not software. I think, like Ed, we're a little bit different. We took a little bit different approach than Streamline, and I think either the types of companies we're bringing on now are 400, 500, 600,000, 2,000 unit companies, and you just have to architect your business a certain way. And yes, track seems like it's new, but it's really not. It's a 5-year-old software going on 6 years. Our first customer was over 1,000 units. They've been banging away at our accounting system for 5 years, And besides that, our company just turned 20 this year. We've got 100 employees up in Minnesota. So I think going into it, we had our eyes open about what our strategy was, what type of companies we wanted to work with. So we're winning. We're going toe-to-toe, and we're winning some nice contracts, and so are they, and we're excited to work with those companies, but our strategy was different, so our challenges will be different. We'll still have challenges, though,
Does anyone have a question for these guys?
One thing
Anyone?
I did is, I actually visited the companies that we came down to the finalists, the 4, and you can certainly see the culture, the people, the setup, the staff, and that's one of the things I would recommend anyone in this this conference. If you're looking at this, invest the time to go up to company headquarters and take a look and see how big their implementation team is, who's running it, what's their experience, meet the system engineer, meet the head of technology, because as great as these people are, they're on the sales or the front side. I want to know who's on the back side that I never see at a conference like this, because those are the people in the trenches. They're the people that are going to be handling the integration. They're the people that are going to be working on the roadmap. Speaking of roadmaps, I asked every company for a roadmap, and I will tell you that ultimately Trax, back when we first visited them, had a comprehensive roadmap that they were able to show me right on the screen. Now, we signed an NDA. I couldn't take it anywhere, but they literally showed me a phased roadmap, because I was, we have functionality that they did not yet have, and I wanted to understand where they were going, how fast they were going to be able to get this. These decisions really are, in part, what the functionality is today, what they're going to promise you the functionality will be once you are ready to launch, and who the integration team is. And so part of this is you've got to trust that the people that you're going to effectively get into a relationship with, that's going to be a pretty important and binding relationship, that they have a good reputation. And the best thing you should do is check references. And this is a small industry. There's plenty of people in this industry who you can reach out to. I had people, that I reached out to, and were brutally honest. They're not going to tell you an email. They're not going to put in writing. But particularly over a phone call or over a drink or two, they're going to tell you. And I was shocked at some of the things people said. I met people that I thought were happy with their software system, and yet, over a cocktail or two, they're telling me, the horror story issues. These are important decisions. You can, it's easy to sign a contract. What's hard is to take multiple steps back and do it in a calculated, methodical manner. The other thing is, bring your staff in. Get your staff involved. We had 10 people, one or two from every department, who was involved in the decision-making process, so that they felt that they had ownership over the choice of the software, and they're going to be part of the integration component. So this is a major decision. Invest the time to vet this properly.
Can I add just one thing to that? You talked about coming to the office. I would also recommend that you get us to provide you with references and go visit them. And the reference really can't be just somebody that's happy with the software. It's somebody that is similar to what you are planning to do, so that you guys can sit down and have a meaningful conversation of where you're going to go with the software and so on. Because it is really one of the most significant pieces that will either make you successful or not.
So right now, I think I've been did you want to weigh in on that? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, because it's interesting when you say the front of the house, back of the house situation, because now, for the first time in 14 years, I'm on both sides of that. So I no longer am responsible for sales, I'm not responsible for marketing, but I'm responsible for our product and the direction of our product. And I think the insight that I'll be able to bring to Streamline and the way we strategize and build features like you asked Ed, I think seeing that from both sides is a major change for me, and I think it's going to be a major change for Streamline. With the Streamline X that we have coming out, it's going to be very experiential, which is what the X stands for, and I think that a lot of the things that property managers experience, I've got to represent them when we roll out this next product series of ours. So it's I think being on both sides of the house is a really ideal place to be, and I think that's where both of them probably play as well a little bit, even if they are sort of responsible for numbers and things like that. I think the companies you see succeeding have leaders that are involved in both sides of it.
Yeah, but I mean, I was sitting at a table and we were seeing a demo of software, and the CEO was there and was saying yes to everything. And I was looking, and I was there with Tom Letty, and Tom Letty was looking at the expressions on the CTO and VP of engineers' faces. So, when people start to play around with accounting deliverables, and, when we say, you need to be able to balance a trust account, and someone says, oh yeah, we can do that by second quarter and move it from fourth quarter to second quarter. That's not how accounting works. Accounting systems, are complicated in this industry because of trust accounting and reconciliation. And in general, most companies underestimate the amount of time it takes to get accounting right, let alone first generation accounting. It's many, many years of customer feedback to perfect accounting. So you've got to make sure that you trust that leadership is not just saying yes to things just to get you to sign a contract so that they can continue to show growth.
I cannot emphasize that enough. Absolutely. It takes years to get accounting properly. And not all trust accounting is the same. And again, this is where niche starts to play. If you're a small company and you're just starting out and all you're doing is rentals, you know what? We'll all be able to, get through trust accounting. But if you need, really complicated things, groups, concierge types of things where you're doing third-party stuff, that takes a remarkable amount of time to get right. And it is, in some states, the difference between being in business and out of business. And in Ben's perspective, it is absolutely most important, because that's going to define if you're profitable and you're going to survive or not. So
let's switch over for a second to the third-party companies. So we have smart home, keyless lock smart home, and where one picks off and the other one drops off, I don't know, so you'll have to explain that to me. But we've got data. We have revenue management, pricing tools. We have housekeeping, property care, CRM, marketing, HR, background checks. Trying to think of the new stuff that's out there. I'm gonna start with you, Matt. What is the hottest thing you see out there? Like, what are your clients really, what are they really looking forward to getting from a functionality or third-party perspective?
I don't want to say it's the hottest thing. I think running good operations is really difficult, especially when you have properties in multiple areas. You have vendors, you have employees. The housekeeping, maintenance, the property care. That I think is one of the biggest areas where you can win or lose. I feel like revenue management is just it's a discipline, and people need to, you either know it or you don't, and if you don't, you need to find someone that knows it. And there's good tools. I don't believe in 100% automation when it comes to revenue management. I believe the best is a combination of an expert managing some type of automation. But the housekeeping and maintenance side of it, I think, I should say, has the biggest area for improvement from the software vendors that are out there. And you see a lot of people that use these PMS platforms, and they don't use their housekeeping and maintenance. And there's a reason for that, you know. And so you can advertise it and you can put it out there, but if your customers aren't using it, then you really need to go back to them and say why, and why do they need to use a third-party product, and how is that product solving the problem better? And then you got to go back to the drawing board and say, do we want to do that, or do we want to just rely on third parties? And that's kind of more of a strategic decision.
Same question to you, Ed. What's the
Well,
hottest? What's it?
I agree with you. Operational functionality is obviously always important. The more you can, as you had said, automation is a great thing, but you still need the checks and balances. I think there's a couple of other things, and they're more further out. But all of these marketplaces that are coming in, I mean, obviously VRBO. Airbnb, you can look at what Uber is doing and apply it back to this industry. But Zillow, is very much planning to come into this industry. It's pretty clear, and they have a slightly different perspective for any of those of you that do real estate, that their role is to try and control those owners, which is what you're trying to do as well. And as they come into this market, you may start to see that they are trying to capture that and potentially take that away from you, as are some of the other portals. So how do you make yourself as sticky as possible to those owners? Without owners, you're out of business. So how do you do that? Part of this is kind of our focus as to where we're moving forward. But the more I talk to people about it, especially my clients, the more they go, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But again, it's mostly based off of those that have an understanding of real estate sales and so on. And I realize Alabama, you have to have a license. In Florida, I don't believe you do. So, if most of you are from Florida, you may, understand where Zillow is going.
Same question.
I would say that your question was what's the hottest, most exciting. For me, it's absolutely, no question, two things: CRM and revenue management. The most important are probably accounting and property care, but obviously it's becoming more and more important to get into revenue management and CRM as experience becomes huge and battling margin compressions becomes huge. So those things obviously are the hottest topics because they're newer, they're more fresh, but obviously when we start talking property care and maintenance and housekeeping, I think I would agree with Matt that there's the most room for improvement in that section of our industry from what's always been there, because I do agree that most of the software providers fall short there. And if you are looking to take on enterprise level companies, like I think all three of us are focusing, you have to really start at property care and accounting and then get into the great features that surround CRM and revenue management.
So we're like, if you look at other solutions in other industries, and you look at these vertical software companies like Procore and Viva and these unbelievable companies, what you got to do is you got to have the base. Like we started with CRM, right? And so that was like, okay, give us the base, then accounting. And once you kind of solve those things and they're solid, then it kind of lets you dream about what the future is. If you could imagine, you look down, from anywhere, and it's an Uber type application where you're seeing where all your workers are, and the system is automatically deploying them based on, their availability to how much their utilization is. Stuff like that I think is going to come into this space. It's used in other spaces. There's open source stuff that's out there, but things like that will help as much as you want to focus on top line. If you can shrink that, that cost and work on the bottom line, I think there's a lot of room to gain stuff there that I don't think people are really doing a very good job, probably all of us included, solving that problem yet, but I think that problem will get solved, and I think of course that needs to be a core part of a PMS, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the holy grail is revenue management. And I mean, look, Jason was up here with some amazing data. And the question is, how do you make extremely complicated data actionable, right? So a lot of the data he was showing was back end. What we're looking at is sample size of front end data that can allow you to literally yield manage based on unit type, based on nights, weeknights, et cetera. And, you know, we've had discussions even with Trax because, you know, I'm going to be joining their advisory board. But how do you get owners? How do you get this information, not just for us, but you get your owners? Because part of our problem is we just don't have carte blanche to reduce rates to where the market is. But we know that we have certain owners that if we could provide them good information, particularly within 30 days or 60 days where they still had opening, that they would allow us to do price concessions if we could provide that information in a way that they could easily understand it. That to me is the holy grail. It's a win-win for everyone. If you can get your owners to agree to price concessions, obviously you're getting the guest in there, they're getting a great deal, you're filling up, you know, those odd occupancy nights, and then the other thing is, you know, you're managing owner expectations. So, you know, we're still a ways away. You know, the frustration level right now, and Jason alluded to this in the Panhandle, is, you know, you're constantly chasing your tail with owner expectations and owners getting upset because, you know, you're always wrong. You've either not booked it fast enough or you haven't booked it for the right rate. You're never right. And you literally lose owners over this, and having that information where you can show them, okay, look, help us, let me help, you know, we can work together on this. Having information is critical. So this revenue management is really the last piece, I think, that would really help all of us in this room manage our owners, and then also, you know, create additional incremental revenue for our owners and ourselves.
I think I've had this conversation with, I think, each of you individually and Ben a lot, is this whole idea of shifting to an asset manager, like looking at it, the homeowner relationship as if you're managing a true asset and creating some reporting around that. Are you guys advancing your owner reporting to create more professional, like using some of this data to throw in some owner reports? And Jason, maybe this is a better question for you. Are you building that?
Yeah, so two things. One is our PM is definitely wanting to share the data with their owners, and we got a couple of months into it, and we saw everybody including in an owner newsletter, but what they were doing is cutting and pasting, and people said they got tired of cutting and pasting. So we did roll out an owner report, and immediately everybody wanted to customize it ad nauseum, so we customized it ad nauseum, like you guys do for everything. But I do feel like there's a big opportunity for the data to connect with the PMSs and figure out how that just becomes part of the standard owner reports with the accounting side, while still giving the PMs the flexibility to, because there's some owners that you want to feed data to, and there's some that it's better just not to speak to, and you got to figure out what those lines are. But the owners, if you can get the information to them, I think that takes a lot of onus off of it.
In the API that you guys have with key data back and forth, do you, is it two-way? Are you just pulling data, or are you pushing data back?
We would love it to be, so I welcome all of you to connect with us too.
We have a single sign-on with them for
Yeah.
data back in.
Look, the key thing here is going to be to take data from a company like Key Data and tie it into your own revenue pacing report, and then feed it in through the owner portal on a opt-in or opt-out basis, and start to educate your owners through the owner portal. That's the next evolution.
Is that something that you guys are headed looking at doing, or do you already have it?
I mean, it's something that we obviously have had discussions about.
Yeah, we had discussions with them.
Oh, is it on your RFP?
I think the VP of Engineer said 2022, but
Well, I think you gotta, right, you gotta look at, you gotta take care of the things that need to be taken care of, and then you have these things that are, you know, more your moonshots, if you will, and some of these things have the ability to be incredibly impactful, and you have to prioritize those things, because at the end of the day, you know, you got to deliver cash to the owner, and that's the challenge of the software company, is taking all those requests along with our own vision and mixing. And that's why you have a good advisory board with people that can kind of guide you, and you listen, and then you go develop and you deploy and you iterate, and hopefully you find a solution that's a winner.
I think one of the biggest, from my experience over the years, one of the biggest things that the companies, software companies, have to figure out is how to strategize their software development in relation to the amount of requests we get from our property managers. We probably got 500 requests in the past several months since we opened up an ideas platform in Streamline, right? So it's vetting those ideas, talking with your advisory board, but also creating a strategy with vision, because right now we're at a point, all of us are at a point where we're a fraction of what we could be over the next 5-10 years if you really have the right engine fueling innovation, fueling development, but you have to do it responsibly. And I think that we're in a situation now where we can take our software companies from here to a whole different level to benefit the property managers and to help offset the challenges that are being put forth by OTAs.
So what we're going to do, thank you for that. What we're going to do is continue this. So we're taking a little quick break.